All right, good evening. This is the Mount Lebanon Zoning Hearing Board. Today is September 7, 2023 at 7 p.m. This is the time and place for appeal number 1857. Property owner Catherine, Kathryn, Barr, BARR, 356 Hazel Drive, Pittsburgh, 15228. Reviewing the items that we have in our possession, we have the cover sheet for the zoning board. We have the application, the official advertisement for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette South, a notice to adjacent property owners, 4 color photographs taken by the municipality, and a justification for variance request submitted by the appellant. At this time, anybody who will be offering testimony, please rise and be sworn in by the reporter. Yep. I do. All right, and then at this time, Ms. Barr, you can come forward and state your case.
Hi, everyone. My husband. So basically what we're hoping to do is remove our garage. As you can see in one of the images, it has been part of the property since the late 30s. And it is just falling into disrepair. And the quotes we have that you can see we outlined in there have become astronomical post-COVID. And it's just not feasible to with another garage or even with a parking pad. It's the quotes that we got for those were. I'm sorry, the quotes that we got for like even just a parking pad versus like a 1-car garage or a 1.5-car garage, those were also very high. So we're hoping to completely remove it, continue the retaining wall that runs from the steps that go up to our house, run that down to the end of our property line, and then backfill, tear down the structure that's in there, backfill it, and then just make it all green space in the front.
And then we would need a permit to park on the street, given the garage is removed.
Can I ask, I'm reviewing your justification request. You have several price figures. The price to do what you're proposing, is that in here?
It's approximately 30 to 40.
It was.
We have an initial quote from a contractor, but not a hard figure.
Okay. For the record, can you summarize your prior appeal, which was 1799 from August 2019?
Yeah, it was, initially we wanted to remove that garage, put in a larger garage. The garage as it stands now is a very old garage. You can't fit a modern car in there and still open the door to get out. We had hoped to widen it to approximately a car and a half dimensions. Expanding it further into our own property line, keeping the wall next to our downhill neighbor where it was, but widening into our own property.
And then,
Can you speak up just a little bit more?
Okay.
yeah, no worries.
Thank you. Go.
So we're gonna make it a 1.5-car garage, and this was all pre-COVID, so we had engineering drawings to that effect. We had all of the stamps and approvals, and then we got married, and then went on our honeymoon, and then bam, it's COVID. So we couldn't act on anything since everything had been shut down. And then by the time we were able to start getting stuff, no normal residential contractor really wanted to touch it, just because it's one of those Pittsburgh specials of in the hillside, but not attached to your home.
So yeah, to add a little detail there, if you've ever driven down Hazel, it's a fairly steep hill, and ours is right up against about as close to the road as you can get in terms of the houses along that road. So there's very little space for the garage in such a steep hill, and that puts the floor of the garage, I think it's 6 or 7 feet below the floor of our basement, right up against the foundation. So what that entails then to rebuild it is likely having to put in 11 feet of underpinning for a good portion of that front corner of our foundation. That substantially increased prices as well as all of the, I guess, reinforcement for the materials, given the steepness of the hill.
Thank you. Mr. Campagnaro, do you have questions?
1 second, I'm still writing it down. In the information you provided us, you did outline, how you believe you've met the 5 criteria that it's necessary to grant a variance. The first one, the unique physical circumstance or condition, it wasn't clear to me in the definition of what that means, how you qualify. So, and I'll just read it, that there are unique physical circumstances or conditions, including irregularity, narrowness. I'm sorry. Oh, slow down, I'm sorry. Irregularity, narrowness, or shallowness of lot size or shape, or exceptional topographical or other physical conditions peculiar to the particular property, and that the unnecessary hardship is due to such conditions and not the circumstances or conditions generally created by the provisions of the zoning ordinance in the neighborhood or district in which the property is located.
Yeah, so that may be covered better in the second section. I apologize if it wasn't clear, but the lot is fairly narrow. We cannot fit a driveway up either side of the house to put a garage in the back. The current garage that's there, if it were to be built today, it would be in violation of zoning because it is so close to the sidewalk itself and the road. It's not a deep enough lot to have a garage in the front yard per zoning.
Okay.
So if we rebuilt it, we'd need a variance. If we moved it anywhere, we'd need a variance. It's just, yeah, to tear it down, obviously, we need the variance. It's not. It's a pretty unique property due to the steepness of the front hills like that.
Okay. All right. I have no further questions at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Rother.
Yes, to expand on that first criteria, the unique circumstances or conditions of the lot. So you provide a survey map as part of your packet, or at least a portion of a survey map. Per the ordinance, the minimum lot width, in an R2 district is 50 feet. Your lot is 50 feet. The minimum lot acre or lot area is 6,000 square feet. Yours is, using the 50 feet by 112.12 feet is 5,606 square feet, or 5,606 square feet. So your lot is smaller than the ordinance. What the ordinance would require.
Could you elaborate on the implications then for the variance with a smaller lot?
I was just mentioning that to document for
Okay,
meeting criteria number 1.
Gotcha.
thank you.
Thank you.
Number 2, second criteria is that because of such physical circumstance or conditions, there's no possibility that the property can be developed in strict conformity of the provisions of the zoning ordinance, and that the authorization of a variance is therefore necessary to enable reasonable use of the property. In the packet, the picture of the survey map does not show the back of the lot. Can you describe the back of your lot?
It's fairly flat. It's actually a decent sized backyard. However, we have no way of accessing it with a vehicle. Either side of the house is too close to our neighbors to put a driveway into the back, and there's no alley access in the back of the house.
Okay. The next criteria, or the third one, is that such unnecessary hardship has not been created by the appellant. Yeah, I believe in your packet and also that you mentioned that the garage was installed or built in the 1930s.
I believe it's the
It's-
original of the house, we're not
yeah.
100% sure.
And I'm assuming it was there when you bought it and
Was, yeah.
purchased. Okay. The fourth criteria, that the variance, if authorized, will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood or district in which the property is located, nor substantially or permanently impair the appropriate use or development of adjacent property, nor detrimental to the public welfare. Have you discussed this with your neighbors?
We have, and we
They're-
have a
they're
neighbor
in
here,
support. An immediate neighbor here,
so, yeah.
everyone we've discussed it with is in support.
It'll clean up the street if we remove it, and the walls at this point are listing, so it'll be safer should a child, for whatever reason, go in there.
The last criteria is that the variance, if authorized, will represent the minimum variance that will afford relief and will represent the least modification possible of the regulation and use. You be able to touch on that?
I think that one, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, we'd need a variance to remove the garage. We'd need a variance to rebuild it large enough to fit a vehicle in. I think the only path that we could go and not get a variance is to rebuild it exactly as is, because as I mentioned, it's the way it's in the front yard doesn't meet current zoning. And I don't think it's reasonable to expect us to spend $90,000 to rebuild a garage and not be able to fit our car.
So how approximately, what's the usable space of, if you would rebuild the garage in the current footprint? What would be the garage space? Kind of like an approximate width by depth.
In the current footprint, I think interior wise, it's around 8 feet and 17 to 18 feet deep. It might
It's-
be.
It's fairly deep, but it is very narrow. Our car before our current car was a Mazda 3, and you could not pull the Mazda 3 inside
Even
the
a small
garage.
hatchback
So it's
car
a small
could
hatchback.
fit.
Yeah, you would have to like escape out the trunk.
Yeah,
And what do you currently use the garage for?
storing garbage cans, we can get our car halfway in there to get it off the street, but we can't. We have to back in so that we can still open the doors and get out.
And for your proposed retaining wall, what type, have you kind of identified what type of retaining wall, what material?
It'll be, you know, the larger, like, commercial grade, basically, like, like retaining wall block that are like
The
3 to
larger
4 feet
blocks.
by like 2.5 feet tall.
With the ones with a nice spacing though, so it
Yeah.
doesn't just look like the side of a highway there.
But just so the hill doesn't move,
You know,
you don't want it to.
that's what we've discussed with our contractor and with our engineer. That said, we need to get new engineer drawings as well if we went this route. So if that approach would be a deal breaker for getting this approved, we could discuss alternate blocking. But we were planning for the larger blocks with a nice spacing to have the most durability and longevity out of the wall.
I have no further questions.
Thank you. You're talking about replacing that retaining wall. Would you just be replacing or installing, I guess, the area where the garage currently exists, or would you just replace the entire wall all along it?
The whole thing,
Go ahead. please.
I was just saying we would replace the entire wall from where our steps to the upper part of the property are, all the way around the corner, as far back as we needed to retain the side from our neighbor downhill.
The other, I wanted to, one of the points in your number 2, you had mentioned about the Mount Lebanon parking zoning ordinance with special permit parking spaces. That assuming this is granted, that doesn't fall under our jurisdiction.
We know,
That's just-
we
okay.
were just offering that as a backup for
Yeah.
the
All right.
removal.
I did speak with the parking officer. I apologize, I forget their name, but they said that if this was approved, then they would be able to review it and they believe approve it, but they weren't willing to give me anything concrete.
I understand. I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. All right, any other questions from either of you?
Not
Right. Thank you. I'll ask you to sit. We will speak with Mr. Sharver next. Mr. Sharver, if you could tell us the position of the municipality.
Position of the municipality is per the ordinance, which is 817.9.10.2, which says a required garage shall not be removed, converted to another use, or replaced with a parking area until an enclosed parking space in a garage is provided. So the objective behind the ordinance is that if you have an existing garage, you need to keep it as a garage, or if you want to convert it or replace it, you would have to replace it with a garage. So obviously, we could not issue a demo permit to remove the garage without first, approving a building permit to reconstruct a new garage or or they would have to come for a variance to actually put a parking pad there or a driveway, et cetera. So there are provisions in the ordinance that allow for certain hardships or criterias for dwellings that never had a garage to be able to, for parking purposes, but being that the existing garage exists, that section supersedes and basically says that it cannot be removed without being replaced. So hence the appellants coming in for a requested variance tonight. And just for the record, I brought the old case and you asked the question, dimensions of the garage. I looked at this old case before we came tonight and there were dimensions in there just so that you have them for the record. The exterior dimensions of the existing are 212 inches deep by 112 inches wide. And the interior dimensions is 196 deep by 96 inches wide. So that's what the appellant has in their previous appeal or variance request as the dimensions of the existing garage as it sits.
What was the interior depth dimension?
Interior depth dimension was 196 inches by 96 inches wide.
Mr. Sharver, we note that just from the appellant's testimony that the garage is in poor condition. Is that, is there an ordinance to condemn something that is no longer usable?
We have an ordinance that basically requires you to maintain what's existing in a safe manner. We haven't taken any official, violation notice that has not been issued or anything like that, being the fact that they have been in the process of trying to do something there with the first application as well as now the second application for a variance for the existing garage. So we have not taken any action. You could see by the pictures that as they testified to that, the truck is backed in, so they can use a portion of it. And based on the inside photos that they have with that, you can see there is some severe damage to the walls, including the existing retaining wall that abuts into it. So another fact that was mentioned about the retaining wall being placed, you can see based on the survey, which is on the 5th page of their submittal, the existing concrete block wall is actually in the right of way So if that were to be built, it would have to be built onto their property. So it would have to be set back, looks like, I can't tell from the survey, but I would say that's 2 foot 10 inches. I don't know if you can determine by that.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah, so it looks like it's, about 3 feet out into the right of way. So we do not allow retaining walls to be built within the right of way. Just for liability reasons, et cetera. Plus free use of the right of way.
The stairs that exist are also in the right of way.
Stairs we allow because that's a required necessity. To provide means of egress from the dwelling to the public way. Which is required by the statewide code, building code.
So if the appellant weren't to do anything, given the condition of the garage, I'd mentioned condemnation, is that something that, because it is not properly maintained, what would happen?
Well, we could potentially write them a violation notice to repair it.
Mhm.
Or make it structurally sound. If that's not an option, then we can condemn it, which means you can't occupy it. But then they would be required to replace it.
Okay.
So hence, that's why they're here tonight to request a variance not to replace it, so.
All right, very good. And did the commission offer any
No
opinion?
testimony from them.
All right, thank you. Mr. Campanaro, do you have questions?
I do not at this time.
Mr. Rother?
I do not.
All right, thank you. I do not either. At this time, we will allow the public to come forward. If you would like to come, please state your name and address for the record, and you may address us.
Aubrey Mooney. I'm the next door neighbor. I've lived there for 17 years, so I lived there with the prior neighbor as well, who had the same struggles and issues. The finances of trying to fix something like this was
I'm
just
sorry, what's your address?
350 Hazel.
Thank you.
I'm directly next door.
Mhm.
So this has been a historical problem before they moved in also. But as a neighbor, I support them in what they're trying to do. That's it. That's it. I support them.
And just from your experience, then, the prior owner had the same
The
challenge?
prior owner had the same issues of trying to get an affordable solution. So they bought into the same situation that was there with the prior owner. He couldn't find a solution for it.
Thank you.
But I agree, it is in disrepair.
Thank you. And our online person,
If anybody online wants to testify, please raise your hand. Online and they have not raised their hand.
all right, very good. Anybody else want to offer anything before we go into executive session? All right, thank you. We will go into executive session and be back out shortly. We're back on the record for appeal 1857. Before we begin, we have a question for Mr. Sarver. And that if the appellant rebuilds the zoning wall, and we had discussed having to move it off of the right of way, and they would need a permit for that process, do they need a variance to move the retaining wall to the location that we're suggesting?
They do not.
Okay,
So, under our grading ordinance regulates retaining walls. And any retaining wall between 2 to 4 feet requires a grading permit. And then the statewide code covers retaining walls. They define retaining walls as anything over 4 feet. So if it's over 4 feet, you need an engineer's design to basically be submitted for a permit. If it's under 4 feet, you don't necessarily need an engineer's design, but the proposed construction still has to meet accepted engineering principles. So you just can't put anything up, but it has to be. So for example, if you put like a pre-manufactured Versalock wall, it would have to meet the manufacturer's recommendations as far as installation, as far as maximum height, et cetera.
mhm. But from the zoning point of view, there's no.
Zoning point, no point of view. Technically, you should, under the grading ordinance, it requires that retaining walls be set in 5 feet from the property lines. But there are provisions in the grading ordinance to grant waivers to that 5-foot requirement if necessary to ensure reasonable use of the property.
Is that something we should do here, or is that
Now,
something?
that's something we
we
do
already-
as the enforcement agency or office of that grading ordinance.
All right, very good. Is that? Yes. So, all right, at this time, we are prepared to vote on Appeal 1857. Mr. Campanera, how do you vote?
I vote to approve.
Mr. Rother?
I vote to approve.
And I also vote to approve. So with that, we will sign the necessary paperwork and they will get back with you. And we are now off the record. Thank you. Yeah, I remember your matter from last time. So and there was something about like the corner of the garage was like. Right. Yeah.